Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third and final Sports Production Leaders Briefing. This one is with outside broadcast facilities providers. My name is Will Strauss. I am an editor at SVG Europe. My co-host today is my boss, essentially, SVG editorial director Ken Kirschbaumer. So I'm going to be on my best behaviour. Hi, Ken.
Hey, Will. You're my boss today for this session.
Okay, we'll go with that, shall we?
Yeah. But wait, I have to say something real quick.
Go for it.
I got this Tottenham Hotspurs scarf in the back. People always write me, how can I be a Spurs fan? I live in New York City. I don't know what the issue is there. I know the Arsenal people don't like them, but it's hanging for a friend. Okay, so please no emails about my loving the Tottenham Hotspurs. Just want to get that out of the way.
Glad we cleared that up early. It was the elephant in the room. Back to the point. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to chat about some of the new technology innovations that we've seen recently. We're going to just discuss some recent production and workflow challenges, and we're going to explore some of the problems that we are still yet to solve. If you have questions for the panel, please use the Q&A tool, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. We'll take questions throughout. If we'll try and insert them where they're relevant. If not, if they're a bit left field, we'll leave them to the end. But please use the Q&A tool. We really appreciate it, rather than the chat tool. Before we start the discussion, we bring out our guests. We are very lucky to have a sponsor for this, which is Panasonic. They've been with us all week. So for the third and final time this week, please welcome Guillaume Reeh, who's Head of New Business and Market Development for Panasonic. Guillaume, over to you.
Thanks, Will. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this final webinar in the Leaders Briefing series. During the previous sessions, I talked briefly about the massive disruption that all of us are currently facing in our businesses. And I also talked about how Panasonic approaches innovation and why we think that more than ever, innovation in technology continues to rewrite the possibilities for business. How to innovate and optimize is clearly at the core of our R&D development. So we have this concept of smart live video production, which is a quite good example of this. Behind this smart live video production is the notion that Panasonic is going beyond the development of simply making great products. For many years now, Panasonic has been devoted to enhancing the usability of its product, making integration into pre-existing systems easier, and doing so providing cost efficiencies for all of our customers. Smart live production includes PTZs and system cameras, tracking systems, switchers, IP platform, in addition, of course, of projection and professional displays. As an extension to the previous sessions, I would talk today some more about some concrete innovations, again, that we are bringing to the market to help our customers overcome specific problems. I talked on Tuesday about our new PTZ cameras and the adoption of protocols such as NDI and SRT to facilitate remote production, and also about the support of the 3D protocol, which contributed greatly to make AR and VR affordable and accessible for much more customers. Yesterday, I presented our 8K ROI system, an automatized and next generation production tool for local and remote production, which allows to provide up to 5 different virtual camera shots from a single camera position by cropping simply into its 8K canvas. And today I will focus more on Kairos, our new IT/IP platform that I briefly introduced yesterday. So we just released this platform, Kairos, on the market. And as I said, it's a new generation IT/IP live video processing platform that basically enables unprecedented productivity for broadcast studios and live events. Basically, Kairos breaks free of the boundaries that come with traditional hardware, allowing production to become even more flexible, dynamic, and powerful. Panasonic with Kairos is again demonstrating great innovation capabilities. The traditional approach is to send baseband signals to specialized hardware products, processing these signals using dedicated hardware boards. The current approach on the market is to make the transition from baseband to IP signals. However, dedicated hardware is usually still required, which is costly and brings many limitations. Now with Kairos, Panasonic goes IP and at the same time uses IT components and software processing, opening the way to a new level of performance for our customers. One of Kairos' strongest features is to be fully resolution and format independent. It's also based on the latest technology in software CPU, GPU processing, allowing to get access to performances currently impossible to get with traditional hardware-based products. Kairos can operate with standard resolution and formats like HD and UHD, of course, but also with non-traditional formats, such as 32:9 for an LED backdrop display, for example. The size of the canvas is freely set by the operator and is rendered live, allowing Kairos to be used as a broadcast switcher and also as a presentation switcher. On top of being resolution independent, Kairos acts like a Photoshop-style tool for live compositing and allows to manage freely an unlimited number of video layers in real time. With Kairos, the concept of scenes is replaced by mix effects, is replaced by scenes, and the layers are replacing the traditional concept of key in a switcher. So one single Kairos server allows to create in a very short time, very intricate compositions that would probably be extremely difficult to create with traditional hardware products, just like the one we are showing here. Kairos is also the center part of the ecosystem and is a platform and not a dedicated product or tool and can serve many purposes. It will also address many markets. The first version of the platform can be used as a broadcast switcher and a presentation switcher. And on top of that, many more features will be added along the way. So what you get with Kairos is one platform and many applications. So Kairos in a nutshell is based on a unique groundbreaking software development, all relying on CPU and GPU processing power, offers true uncompressed video processing and uncompressed 4K inputs, use precision time protocol for synchronization, gives full support of baseband and IP signals all at the same time, gives access to a user-friendly software interface, and offers a super low 1 frame latency processing. So first on the market, and it's making Kairos an extremely powerful tool in all contexts and applications. And last but not least, as mentioned, Kairos acts like a Photoshop-style tool for live compositing, giving access to unlimited video layers. So I'm pleased to say that Kairos is now available and shipments start this month. This wraps up my presentation for today, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our customers for their trust and continued support. And on behalf of Panasonic, I also would like to wish everybody to stay safe and well. Thank you for your attention and have a great session, everyone.
Thanks, Guillaume, so much for that. Okay, so it's time to start our panel discussion, and we have a great group of 3 top-level executives joining us with 3 of the top companies in Europe in remote production. Please welcome Richard Morton from CTV Outside Broadcast, Andrew Jordan from NEP, and Wolfgang Reeh from TV Skyline. Gentlemen, great to see you all. Thank you. Hope you're all doing well.
Very good. Glad to be here.
Thanks.
That's what I like to hear.
Thank
all
you
right,
very much.
Obviously, if in normal world, we would have been at the IBC last year, having this at the Delamar Theater. It would have been wonderful. The Amstel Heinekens would have been flowing. So we wanted to kind of start with kind of talking about what you might have seen last week at IBC, but what you have seen, because I know the technology innovations are going on, and you are getting obviously the press releases. I'm sure you're reading all of our blogs and videos and stories, keeping up to date. So I want to start with Richard as far as, has there been anything last 2 months or so that you've seen in terms of new products or innovations that you think will make a big difference for CTV?
Yes, well, first of all, thanks for having us all along today, and of course for missing our annual IBC trip. But the big news from CTV and the work I've been busily engaged with over the past 6 months or so is the delivery of our brand new IP truck, which as it happens is departing for its first job this weekend. So we're all very excited about that. And it's a triple expando truck comprising of a data center and separate trucks with really big, massive production spaces. So as far as technology that we're looking at, it's technology that falls in line with our growing IP infrastructure and also supporting our existing legacy trucks as we wish to bring everything together into a modern IP ecosystem. So looking for versatile, multi-purpose devices, of which, of course, some of them are in the brand new truck, with it being so up to date. Things like the Imagine SMP, the Imagine Communications have recently released new processing options for this equipment. So this is something of huge interest to us as they continue to expand and develop it, and we can use that in the IP world and the SDI world as well. Grass Valley have released the K-Frame XP, which we've been eagerly awaiting for full raster UHD IP production. And perhaps something to look out for later on this year. As we know, EVS acquired Axon in recent months, and I think feeding into our IP world, Axon and EVS products feature quite heavily at the core of what we do here at CTV, both in hardware and software. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see what these guys bring together. We know that Axon have their control system Cerebrum, and EVS have the Scoremaster application. We use Cerebrum in every truck and every system that we have, and it's going to be very exciting to see how some of the IP developments, both, as I say, in the hardware and the software, come together from those companies. But having just built the truck, one of our most challenging experiences is the control and management of the network and of the IP devices. So seeing, as well as the lighting, it seems. So seeing what these guys can bring together to support IP deployments is going to be very exciting.
Sure. Wolfgang, from the TV Skyline perspective?
Well, I missed, and before that, hello to everybody out there. I missed being together with all of you because even that we have these technology with Zoom and all the other products, it is not the same, as we all know, than being together, including the missing beer can. I also had a look again and again on what is going on, and our focus was a little bit more on these kind of streaming, encoding, and cloud technologies during the last months. Fortunately, we do have a quite modern fleet of OB vans at TV Skyline. So that gives us the opportunity to focus on this kind of technology, which we, fortunately, started some time ago before. So we did not start in March when the lockdown shocked us and said, oh, what is this now? So we continued, but with a kind of turbo to work on this new technology. Training the people, it's the typical vision engineer, audio engineers need to get additional new knowledge in that new IP, streaming IT world. And that is a continued process, what we are doing now.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, Andrew, I guess if there's anybody here who is missing IBC, it's probably you, because I don't think you've had a chance to meet with anybody since you joined NEP 3 months ago. I mean, who knows, hopefully before the end of 2021, I don't know, you may make it 15 months without getting a chance to say hello to anybody. But first of all, welcome to the industry. Give us a little bit of background as far as where you came from, because I know that you've worn a couple hats in the industry. So first, I want to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Welcome everyone, and thanks for inviting me to this. It's been a slightly odd experience joining a company and sitting in this chair for about what feels like 20 hours a day, and not actually flying anywhere to go and see anyone. I was fortunate enough actually to go meet many of the exec team in Pittsburgh before lockdown, so at least I've met some of my colleagues, if not sort of been around on my sense of operation. But the role's a new role. I suppose there's two kind of main focuses when we think about our traditional broadcast services business and our relatively newer media solutions business. On the one hand, it's taking a really kind of holistic view across all of our CTO groups and saying, how do we start to be more obvious and defined about our technical strategy and our roadmaps, and sort of put our stamp on things, some of which I'll talk about when I talk about things we've been up to. And then the other is to really think about what the future holds. You know, what does the future hold for our business? Where's the industry going? You know, some of those key trends, and really, you know, we're fortunate that we've got a fantastic investment partner in Carlyle Group, who are really encouraging us to think in a fairly broad way about where we can take the company, and you know, driving that hard as we accelerate our way out of the lockdown. So it's a very broad role. It's obviously exciting with joining just around about the same time as our new CEO, Brian Sullivan, who's obviously going to come with a huge amount of experience, having worked at Sky and Fox before. So yeah, it's good to be here.
So as far as the, because when you were at NBC, you mentioned how that was a few years ago, and NBC was just embarking on their new broadcast facility, looking at IP and all kinds of new technologies. So when you come back in, you know, obviously things have evolved. So what's been your take as far as that evolution? Were you kind of surprised at the state of things now and the acceleration that's going on? Yeah,
it has been an amazing sort of step in, step out, step back in again. I joined NBC back in 2012. Jeff Shell, who was running international for NBC at the time, hired me, and it was when kind of OTT was really beginning to hit the big league, but not in a way that it has now in kind of creating, you know, new modes of production and new players in the industry like DAZN. And that sort of genesis really started a process that resulted in building a huge media operations center in a place called Dry Creek, just outside Denver, that I was heavily involved in both the business case and the resulting build. And I remember when we stood that facility up, looking at where was best in class in terms of you know, advances in technology around media asset management, around content distribution, what role cloud played, you know, what role SDI still played as we moved towards IP. Obviously 2110 wasn't around then, and then kind of seeing that sort of set in motion. And then I stepped away for 4 years to go and work for another private equity backed business outside of media, and then coming back in and seeing that just now become so much more commonplace. And in fact, a couple of things, you know, that I've seen most recently since I've joined that I think are good sort of, I think they're good indicators of where this industry could be headed. I think one was one that you pushed out a couple of months ago, I think, or no, actually more recently on from Grass Valley on that AMP product. So thinking about where you can achieve cloud production fully, and not just using cloud for pieces of it like media asset management. And the second is Amazon's announcement, which I think was either yesterday or today, which was their cloud digital interface. And actually, you know, that to me is now addressing one of those big key barriers to achieving cloud production, which is, you know, how do you overcome latency at scale? And you know, obviously it's new, so we'll see. But I think that's a very, very interesting development.
My turn to jump in. Thank you for that, Andrew. That's, I mean, talking of interesting, you did join at something of an interesting time. Certainly has been the most unusual 6 months I can remember in my 20 years covering this the TV market. But what have you been involved with, and what's NEP been involved with recently? What challenges, and how have you overcome them?
I mean, clearly the industry has been challenged as a whole. You know, notwithstanding the obvious statements around, you know, big events being taken out of the calendar or pushed into next year. COVID's obviously created constraints around, you know, proximity of our workers, particularly around trucks and truck design. I mean, it's interesting because I spoke at the top of the call around things that got accelerated as a result of COVID, and probably one good example, which was covered on SVG as well, was a project that we did for Fox Sports in the Netherlands, which was actually in frame pre-COVID, but COVID allowed us a little bit more time and breathing space to actually build this out in a bigger way. And in essence, what we did was we took a very traditional kind of SDI based infrastructure and moved it to a 2110 compliant IP infrastructure. So it really was truly moving to a hub and spoke architecture. So all of the technology sits back in our Hilversum data center, and all the, like the control interfaces, monitors and cameras, etc., are in the Endemol Shine building, about 10 kilometres, I believe, away from Hilversum. So that's where Fox produce all their live sports. Now, obviously, what that then gives you is access to all of the equipment that we have back in our data centers, which we can kind of dial up and dial down pretty freely. You know, whether it's putting additional replay channels in, or doing live event streaming, or bringing elements of augmented reality or enhanced graphics in play. Looking at remote cameras. Getting very creative with editing. It's a good showcase of how you innovate through a crisis. In my view, it's not a case of we've got to go in lockdown and we can't actually do anything new. It's demonstrated that capability is there and it works, and it creates hugely advantageous economics. So I think that's one that I would put up there as saying it's a real success story for us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Richard, I mean, along those lines, I mean, obviously, you guys have decided to launch a new facility in the midst of a pandemic for remote operations. Can you give a little bit of an overview of that facility and what it's going to mean for CTV going forward? As you look to, I guess it's not on wheels, right? It doesn't move.
It's here in High Wycombe. It's about 200 meters from where I'm sat at the moment. And as Andrew's just saying, the pandemic has oddly resulted in a few interesting success stories. And the EMG UK ROC is certainly one of those. So here's EMG, of course, EMG being CTV, telegenic, KCS, and broadcast RF. We've built a ROC comprising of multiple control rooms, primarily for live BT and BBC sports here in High Wycombe. Of course, the main challenge was the pandemic, the timescale, the reduced team numbers that we had during the time, and the project had to be developed rapidly. Fortunately, we had a very experienced team of people from CTV and telegenic. The design to delivery was basically 3 weeks. The design stage had to be quite fluid. As we were putting drawings together, as we were installing cables, we were testing the workflow with BT Media and Broadcast and ROB trucks. We're having a lot of discussion about topics such as latency, networking, intercom communications, redundancy. How can we provide a resilient, fail-proof service as people had expected before? And of course, we were having to repurpose existing building spaces. So there's a lot of building work to repurpose these spaces. We had to install power, air conditioning, furniture. The technical integration had to be installed. And in and amongst all of this, of course, the protective screens, the air purification systems are an integral part of what we're doing here in the ROC. That bit is the new normal, if you like. And proving that safety workflow was just as important as proving the production workflow and the technical workflow. It was quite a complex sort of coordination to bring all these things together. And outside of this, of course, we're trying to build all this stuff. And like us, suppliers weren't operating at full capacity. So we're wanting things quickly on a reduced lead time, on a reduced time scale. And the suppliers were having to find ways to meet our deadlines, as well as us complete the project on time. So as I say, timing and coordination in ensuring safe COVID environments during the build and after the build, and of course maintaining that today and onwards has been key. Of course, and it is remote production, so ROB trucks are still on site, providing the on-site facilities. So they had to be modified to be COVID safe and to have similar facilities in to continue the on-site operation. But thankfully, we had a very focused team, and in 3 weeks we delivered 3 operational galleries for the restart of the football season. And it's been a brilliant success. And as we speak, the ROC here in High Wycombe is being expanded, and additional facilities have been added for the restart of the season. And we've also built a similar facility up in Salford to expand the northern counties as well.
Excellent, great. So Wolfgang, I mean, how have you approached it from your company as far as this new opportunities around remote production? And it's interesting when I think back to conversations we've had in Europe at SVG Europe events, as far as this whole, ability to kind of have people working from home and in disparate locations and separated. In the US, obviously it's much more attractive because we have a big, massive country, but in Europe, it's been very much of the mindset of, well, in Germany, we can get the trucks from point A to point B, so we don't really necessarily need these sort of facilities. So what's your take in Germany? Has the pandemic changed the philosophy towards remote production facilities?
Yeah, indeed, Ken. It is maybe because Germans are typically a little bit more conservative or traditional, and the country is not that huge as the US. The transition is not this fast and this hard as in some other countries. So when I look back, beside the main lockdown phase of a couple of weeks, where, let me say, nearly nothing happened, then we came back with the Bundesliga. I think this was recognized worldwide with the concept of the hygiene, and yeah, we have been involved there. We did productions every weekend. It worked fine, and it was a traditional outside broadcasting on every match, so no change, except we have no audience in the stadium, and we had less people in the OB truck, and yeah, everybody's wearing a mask and so on, as everybody knows. So from this point of view, the change was not as big as Richard talked about here in Germany so far. We decided to take some work and more time into developing flexible remote production kits, streaming kits, more for our customers in the industry, so the corporate clients. And therefore we needed flexible solutions. For example, we just developed a kind of, we call it silver box. It's a cube with a server in it and some additional technology, and we can handle this kind of box for a lot of different tasks. So it can be a production unit, 3-camera unit, whatever. It can be a slow-mo highlight machine. It can be, on the other side, a exchange of an SNG, so just to bring signals from A to B. You can use it as an encoding and decoding device. Yeah, it's flexible, stackable, and we use it for a lot of different tasks in the meanwhile. So yeah, you're completely right. The situation is a little bit different in Germany. Now in September, I just can talk for us, for TV Skyline, we have the same amount of jobs of productions than we had that before Corona, and but it's still the point that we are looking into a future where we not exactly know where it will go.
It's interesting you should mention about the trucks before and after, and not knowing where to go. I'm interested to get a view from the whole panel, really, about the commercial pressure you've been under. There was obviously a period in the spring, where there was no work going on at all, no sport, and then it's come back very, very quickly. Maybe we'll start with Andrew this time, if you don't mind. What sort of commercial pressures has NEP faced in the last 6 months?
Well, it's probably no surprise to say it's not just us, it's everyone in the broadcast business. Whether it's advertising revenue, whether it's, it's sports that are getting postponed and cancelled. I mean, our approach from day one, the minute the lockdown, the crisis started to hit, was actually focused on things like keeping our employees safe, and actually thinking about how we innovate our way out of the crisis. So And that's not just us, that's actually working with our customers because they're going through the same challenges as we were. So whether that's, sort of thinking about virtual audience solutions, for when sport comes back, obviously without audiences, then that's not anything that we were considering innovating before because we didn't need to. But that, as I said, I think what that does is it creates a sort of a protectionist approach to our business because it allows us to work positively with the customers rather than just kind of going, oh no, we're all doomed, everyone's furloughed, it's terrible. We kind of took a very different perspective and we said, what's the best way we can keep most of the most of our employees that we can gainfully employed in thinking about innovation, and actually thinking creatively how we can get sport back quickly once obviously government regulations allowed it. So some of the stuff that I was talking to about before related to centralized production or cloud-based solutions, think about workflows in a different way, where, as I say, where human to human proximity stops becoming an overhead. It allows you to still achieve the exact same production, but you're doing it in a slightly different way. So I'd say we kind of came through this in a way that made us stronger and better. And I'll give you another example from our live events side of the business. So we put a lot of effort into thinking about what virtual events look like. And I don't just mean Zoom webinars, I mean where you've actually got virtual, studios. And the great thing about that is, I think once live events start coming back, as in audience-based live events, those virtual experiences will probably stay, because corporations will want to supplement their in-person meetings with what the wider reach that those virtual solutions present. So, in everywhere that we looked, we thought really carefully and creatively about how we could use technology in a way that, as I say, we either may have done it before, but in a longer time frame, or that we never even thought of. And that put us in a really, really strong position once sports started to come back.
Thank you. If you're doing virtual events, you should perhaps talk to us, as we're stuck on Zoom. Richard, bringing you on this very similar subject, is there anything that your clients can do potentially to help make sure this ecosystem stays healthy?
Well, it's kind of echoing some of the things that Andrew's just said, really. I mean, everything's very fluid at the moment. Things need to be consistently on the move, even for established productions. The enhancements that we're being asked for are different, they're varying, and it's really all of us together just need to engage in forward thinking. We all need to think forwards together. And from my point of view, as the head of projects, as somebody who is at CTV, involved in the responsibility of delivering solutions to clients, as long as we know what people want to achieve, then we can find ways to achieve it. It's about the innovation, it's about forward thinking, it's about trying to predict what people might want to do, but having a bit of a steer on the sorts of visual results that people desire. Then we can go away and try and find things. And of course, that might be to do with how people logistically wish to work as well. What are the desires for working on site, for home workers, for remote production? A case of knowing, I'd say, really, from my point of view as the projects person.
Thank you.
So I guess following up on the whole virtualization and sort of some of the themes of the cloud and all these things that came up earlier, what I find interesting is obviously, when this whole thing started, one of my first thoughts was, the future of your businesses, right? Because they're very capital intensive. What's the ripple effect as far as if the revenue is not coming in, how do you kind of commit to building new trucks and making that investment? But, and unfortunately not having any be an IBC, there's all this virtualized systems, which could move from a CapEx to an OpEx. So in general, what do you see as the challenge for building new facilities? Will virtualized hardware systems make it easier for you to build facilities in the future? And then therefore the focus of your value proposition isn't necessarily having that big arsenal of hardware, but rather your expertise and your ability to kind of really shape a project properly virtually. Wolfgang, I'm going to start with you, put you on the spot.
Yeah, that is a not so easy to answer question. I think one of the things we have to realize is we pretty well know about the time we can use the equipment what we bought in the past. You know, we know exactly, okay, a camera chain will last, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, depending on the company. Some use it longer. Lenses you can use a little bit longer, other things shorter. These new equipment, these encoder technology, these streaming capacities, we do not know at the moment how long they will last, or let me say how long we can use it. Yeah, some people, I don't know, working with MPEG-4, others working with MPEG-5, and others are working already on MPEG-6, you know, and so that is something which makes it a little bit difficult at the moment. And I think the service providers, like we all are here, have to be very careful in the decisions of the investments in this kind of technology. And I think, well, Richard or Andrew, I think maybe you'll have a similar thinking, or you can help me in that.
Well, yeah, but well, Andrew, let me put you on the spot, because I think you have, having worn the NBC hat, so you've seen both sides of this equation, right? So we're hitting an opportunity for the NBC to say, guess what, we're just going to spin up the US Open channel for 3 days and then spin it down and what have you. So what do you see as this new mix of what your clients may want and how you can serve them differently with this whole virtualized world?
Well, I mean, I think this move to virtualized hardware, cloud, you know, this has been around in every industry for a long time and in varying stages of maturity. And I think all we're seeing is it beginning to kind of land in scale within the media industry because of some of the previous barriers to getting that to work at scale, such as, you know, overcoming the latency challenge. I mean, I think as I see this whole thing evolve over time, it's almost like kind of 3 layers that I see. You're going to have, at the top layer, you've got things like the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the World Cup, those very, very premium, you know, high grade, high quality productions. Can I see that going to cloud anytime soon? No. I mean, there is just so much complexity to doing that. I mean, I remember going down to the RBC in the London Olympics when NBC were doing the Olympics then, and just the complexity of what was being stood up then. And I can only imagine what it's like now. And you know, the logistics of trying to get that across all the different locations when you're producing something like the Olympics. There will be elements that cloud will play a part in that, but will it go to full cloud production anytime soon? No. So I think if you kind of come down to one rung below that, I can see the benefits coming from using centralized production at scale becoming a bit more frequent. Some of it's been fueled by COVID, obviously, because it gives you options around, you know, things like remote commentary that we wouldn't have ever entertained before, and certainly that comes down a lot to what our clients are wanting from a production partner, because, you know, there's a lot of people actually quite like going to the stadiums to do the commentary, and sticking them in a box somewhere, you know, 500 miles away is not very inviting. So I think you'll start to see this sort of mix between that first tier and the second tier start to sort of flex a bit. And I think that third tier is when you've got much more opportunity to start to expand live production into areas where it wouldn't have been cost effective to roll a truck to. So if you're looking at like college sports or events where if you can truly create a commoditized cloud offering that's very low price point entry, and it's like a 4-camera game, and you might be able to even control some of those cameras robotically, then I could start to see you're opening up live sports, you know, particularly if it's delivered at a streaming service, to a much greater audience than we've just ever thought possible before. So I don't think it's a kind of an either or, I think it's an and, you know, I suppose the good news is we're looking at all 3 and, you know, and responding and working with all of our clients to offer them options. So, you know, if like we did with Fox, and So I don't see it necessarily as a threat and a sort of trying to erode our traditional OB model. I think it's just more, it's giving clients more flexibility in the way that they think about doing productions.
Sure. Richard, from your standpoint?
Yes, I think there's some interesting points there. I don't think we're going to be seeing, from our point of view, in big, large-scale OB trucks and fly packs, 190 inputs of virtual switches in the cloud anytime soon, doing 4K. So of course the connectivity is a problem, the storage space is a problem, on it goes really. It's about some of the smaller scale productions perhaps, and from our point of view, it's perhaps understanding how we can use virtualization to perhaps as a way of enhancing and broadening the depth of our services that we can offer. We've already talked about how we've made the brave move to remote production as a result of COVID, and maybe using virtualization we can broaden those services. But it's also been interesting to know how we could use it to reduce the amount of equipment that we have to transport and freight around. Can we reduce our footprint on site in some way or another, be it in the physical footprint and the carbon footprint on site, or can we use it to take affordable services to a client's doorstep? And certainly we're well on the way making our transition to IP. We've got some great IP workflows here, and virtualization is perhaps the next step, but it's seeing which tier of production it fits into. But as we're seeing, we're having to adapt and be flexible to what the marketplace is looking for, and that involves bringing solutions of all different scales. And this is just another peg on that scale, perhaps.
Interesting you should say all those things, because there's all IT things, aren't they? We used to talk about broadcast things and cables and BNC connectors, but these are all IT things. I'm wondering, maybe Wolfgang, you'd be a good person to answer this question. Do your staff and your crew and your people now need IT knowledge as much as anything else? And what sort of IT knowledge do they need, and what's prompting it?
Yeah, indeed. It is necessary for us, and I think for all the other service suppliers on the market, to add this additional new knowledge to our audio engineers, to vision engineers, to everybody. Also because I think these people, which are very important for our industry, they know how productions are done. And I personally think it is not sensible now to try to bring broadcast or production knowledge into IT guys and let them go on site or do the production even in a central control room. It is easier to bring this IT knowledge to our broadcast experts. And yes, we need IT experts for the very detailed, deep problems we are facing. But at the end, when these kind of systems are set and done, and then we go a little bit more on the recall button of a VSM system or whatever. And so I think these guys need that knowledge. Yeah, we continuously work on that at TV Skyline. And it is a kind of knowledge, how to handle big bandwidths on a network with special switches. Is it better to have a 10 gig or a 25 gig SFP? How can you go with the layers? What are the settings of the switches? Which switch working with which one and not? Yeah. And it's so in detail, and so as some of the equipment we need now is not as expensive as a router in the past, maybe, or a switcher in the past. On the other hand side, we need more knowledge, and because of that, this question, well, it's the right question. And everybody has to focus on that. That is what I would personally recommend.
Thank you. Can I just very quickly ask Richard and Andrew, is it easier to teach a broadcast person IT skills or teach an IT person broadcast skills?
That's the loaded question.
Well,
It is, but it's one of my favourites.
That's
You've only got 10 seconds.
Well, that's very difficult. I think it's more difficult to amass the broadcast production knowledge, or perhaps I'd like to think it is, because that's the field I'm from. So I'd say our primary objective here is delivering television productions. So first and foremost, you've got to be able to pull a television production out of the bag. And fortunately, there's a lot of places, and we've invested at CTV in these sorts of platforms for IT and IP training, and it's available on all levels. And I think the big thing is the next generation of talent that's coming through all of our respective companies. It's starting then to the next generation. It's about the next generation gathering and amassing the experience of the big productions that we put together, all the different genres, but also nurturing the IT training from the outset, I would say.
Yeah, I think that was a yes. Andrew, yeah. Broadcast to IT or IT to broadcast, which is easier?
Well, I'll tell you what I will say. I've seen a lot of the broadcast engineers just self-starting in this area and going out and figuring stuff out and actually being really interested. If I think about some of the stuff that we built internally around control, principles around things like software-defined networking and how you optimize the use of IP workflows is, that's language that could be spoken by an IT person, but the broadcast guys are really they're neck deep in understanding it and then trying to get the best from it. And I suppose, not dodging the question, but I've not seen that type of sort of self-starting happening in the other direction. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, I just haven't seen it.
Fair enough.
Also, I guess you've seen, and Richard, I want to follow up on talking some UHD and HDR, but also just to follow up real quick. I mean, I think a few years ago, people probably thought the IT systems would be much more work intensive to deploy, but it seems like the broadcast industry has kind of made things very plug and play, regardless of whether it's IP or, good old fashioned SDI and baseband. Do you kind of feel that? So it's not necessarily the burden as much as people thought. We were thinking about doing a COTS switch, right? Off the shelf Cisco switch, and then you'd have to kind of figure it out. But it seems like it's a lot more intuitive than maybe we thought it would be.
I think it depends which day of the week you catch me on, to be honest. This is truthfully been quite a journey for the past year and a half, really. We've been working on this. A year and a half ago, we started our lab in a room here, which started off with a very small scale setup. And then we've developed it into this data center and suite of production spaces that follows it round on the end of some fiber cables. In and amongst, we've done a few impressively large productions along the way, all IP as proof of concept, but also as a great way of delivering to the clients. So I wouldn't say that it's all been straight out of the box by any stretch of the imagination. There's been a few tears and sighs along the way, but I'll tell you what, the results are looking really good. And I suppose I'm the person that's had to be there helping to bring the project along. But hopefully for the incoming engineers that are going to be operating the truck on a daily and weekly basis, it will enable them to have some of the experiences that you're talking about, Ken.
There you go. Cool. So yeah, well, I know that one of the key drivers 2 or 3 years ago was UHD and HDR, right? You can't really do UHD without IP. So are you all still seeing interest in the UHD, or is that kind of, I know that in Europe you guys are actually ahead of us, I think, in the US, but is UHD still trugging along as far as HDR, or has anything been pushed back because of the pandemic? Richard?
Well, our Sky Cricket has continued in UHD, so we've been broadcasting that in UHD. The Euromedia Rock enables UHD HDR remote surface production, and that's attracted quite a lot of interest and bookings in the past and coming weeks. But I suppose just at the moment, really more than UHD HDR, it's been these demands for other services that might previously have been there to supplement a main production, such as the virtual audiences through, Zoom, Skype, using things like Live View, this sort of integration. And we've had some incredibly successhout productions with this. We did the Ranga Nation series, which was aired on BBC throughout lockdown. That was a lot of Zoom and Skype. That's that sort of contribution, and we've seen that develop into other programs as well. So since then, we've done the BAFTA Television Awards, which has had a virtual audience. We've done Britain's Got Talent, which has had a virtual audience. And we've also been working on other fixed rig shows that have utilised Skype and Zoom for remote production elements. So really, it's the focus has really been on some of these additional services rather than perhaps fresh UHD HDR inquiries. Really, that all that stuff's just continued as it was, and we've developed the remote working around it and developed some of these additional services to solve requirements.
Who knew at the beginning of 2020 we'd be talking about Skype and Zoom over HDR? That wasn't on my roadmap, I can tell you that much for free. We're coming towards the last 10 minutes now, so I've got some big and I think quite important questions to ask you. I'm going to start with Wolfgang. We've talked about problems we've already solved. What problems are there still to be solved? What else are you what challenges and problems are you still looking to solve?
Yeah, maybe it's not what you want to hear, but from my point of view at the moment, sometimes it's less the technological problems, more than times we are facing that logistic and staff problems in that times, to have enough people driving from A to B, or to be allowed to go to a place A or B. So this is a challenge, and it is difficult to make plannings today for a production which will be in 3 or 6 weeks. And things are changing every day. So just an example from this morning, we are supposed to do a football game in Vienna now on Sunday, but yesterday the German government decided that Vienna is now a risk area. That means everybody who's coming from Vienna has to go into a 2 weeks quarantine. Yeah. And these kind of decisions, where you do not have anything to say, we are all sitting on the passenger seat, in this moment. It's what I'm talking about the challenges. On the technical point of view, from our side, it is not that difficult. No, we are good to go before the pandemic. We are still good in that.
So is your crew already there? They're already in Vienna? And now?
No. It's on Sunday, and now we are discussing with the client. It's this afternoon how we will solve the problem. There is maybe a solution that they get a quick test, and with receiving the result after 10 or 12 hours, and then they do not have to go into a quarantine. But then the Bundesliga comes and says, oh, if you have been in a risk area before, you're not allowed to come with or without a negative test. So that's it.
And CTV had the same thing with the golf in Spain, if I recall, listening to Bill Morris and Hamish talking on our Clean Freaks calls. They had the same situation.
That's right. That's right. We've just done a golf down in Andalusia, and then across in Portugal. And then, of course, as you say, it's all about, there's lots of talk about bubbles, the isolation on the way back. When can you enter the bubble? When can you exit the bubble? It strikes me as a logistical nightmare, something I'm glad I'm not responsible for planning.
Well, let's get it back to things you are responsible for. What other problems, challenges, technical workflow production, preferably, rather than COVID, because we can't solve COVID unless you have skills that I don't know about. What other production, technical or workflow challenges are still to be solved, Richard?
Well, I think there's clearly a lot of demand for the remote production on different scales, as we said before. So from our point of view, it's how can we maintain supply for the demand, juggling the facilities that we've got to keep the provision of remote facilities, and of course, some of this stuff was put together quite quickly, and we've all been on quite a quick learning curve with how to deliver some of these facilities. So and a lot of it's working. It's all working. Everything's working very well and has been incredibly successful. But now it's about how to streamline the deployment. How can we standardize our deployment offerings? How can we streamline technical support to home workers? You know, we have a variety of home workers that sometimes, in some situations, using their own equipment, in some situations, using our equipment. Wherever possible, we've tried to deploy PC-based solutions to people's homes for remote workers. We came up with a PC-based VPN solution during the lockdown, and that's been incredibly successful. So through a small package, it was interesting to hear Wolfgang talk about his silver box. Made me think a little bit about what we've been doing here. Really, you send this package to somebody's house, and they can have a real intercom panel like they have in the truck, because people expect to have the sorts of services they have on the desk in the truck on their desk at home, right in front of them. And by delivering PCs, it means we can also deliver additional services and facilities through that PC to the remote workers. So as things scale up, be it intercom, be it video, be it contribution feeds, panels, it's possible to do that. So for us, it's how we can standardize that, how we can streamline the support, and just make things a little bit cuter, really.
Understood. Andrew, is there anything still from NEP's point of view? What problems are you still to solve, if any?
I've never heard anyone call technology cute before, but so you know, I think the way that I would describe it is that things are just getting more complicated now, and by that I mean the variation in operational models, the variation in technical models. You know, we've talked about cloud production, we talked about remote or centralized production. They all impose a new set of problem solving on you. I mean, you know, if I was to single one thing out, I would probably say connectivity. You know, if you're in a world where you've now got to think much more in a much more complex way of joining up a load of events, particularly if you're in the US where they're geographically spaced apart. You know, how do you do that in a way that's still efficient from a cost perspective, but also efficient in using new advances in technology, whether it's, you know, Amazon solution, whether it's bundled 5G. You know, how do you bring elements of SDN over the WAN so that you can actually create capacity on demand? I think some of those things we're walking our way forward on it because our clients are asking us to, but I think we're still in that flux. I think Richard said it before, you know, we're in this very sort of fluid world at the moment, and we've just got to be on the top of our game, both in terms of listening to client needs and also being creative in what solutions we put forward.
Okay.
So I wanted to look forward, you know, before we leave, to the next year, which obviously, if any of you can forecast the next year, starting with U.S. politics, I'll gladly discuss this. But you know, the whole world is obviously in flux, so there's no wrong answers here. But as far as the the 2021 calendar, right? So some of the events have been pushed back from 2020 to 2021. What's your sense on the amount of business that you're anticipating next year? I mean, do you think it'll feel normal as far as the schedules, since a lot of the leagues have and federations have really kind of figured out how to do testing properly? Are you feeling, I guess, decently centered emotionally as far as the future of the business and the relationship with your clients? Wolfgang, I'll start with you.
Well, that is a good question again, Ken, as usually from you. It depends, as we all know, on the things what happened with the COVID-19 and on the decisions made by the governments all over, and how many restrictions they will give us and or they will give on big events. And I think from my feeling, it is that we will getting back to this kind of so-called new normal. It sounds hard, but for us as OB van suppliers, if we go to a stadium, if there is there an audience or not, is not top on the list. You know, it's most important for us to go there and do the production. To be honest, and when or how many of the audience are allowed to come back is not this important for us. And I hope that other sports are able to get the problem solved with the financing. You know, football is receiving a lot of money from the stations, but the other sports, you know, will not receive so much money. Who need the income from the ticket sales? You know, this is a bigger problem, and we all do want to have a big variety of sports on the screens, and not only football and maybe Formula One. So yes, I see we will get back more and more, and we still all have to be creative, and we have to keep our fingers crossed that it will not get too difficult with the amount of people who get this virus.
Sure. Richard, from the CTV perspective, as far as the return to normal, I mean, the Ryder Cup will be next year, hopefully, and there's a lot of other events going on that we're supposed to be this year.
Well, we're hoping so, Ken. We're very much hoping so, and I think the positive thing is it's great to see that everybody, including the sports bodies, are very keen to stay on track. So, you know, we just have to hope that the Olympics do indeed go ahead. Perhaps at the moment, there's no reason to think there wouldn't be an Open, a Ryder Cup, some normal sports seasons. I'm sure they'll look a little bit different. But you know, these are huge events, and perhaps in the meantime, it's for us to keep you know, broadening the services that we can provide, listening to what's going on, and as best developing services and facilities to make sure we're not the block to anything going ahead. You know, just do what we can to keep the solutions and the services flowing. Question will be what happens with remote production. I think that's possibly here to stay for the foreseeable future. I think clients are perhaps enjoying the conveniences much as we've learned to enjoy some of that convenience as well. You know, and it's possibly quite interesting to see from the production company's point of view and our clients' point of view, the shift in the work-life balance with remote production. People aren't having to travel all over. People aren't having to drive up and down the motorways to go and do a 90-minute game. So that's an interesting slant that might cause the remote production to persist for longer, which we hope it does. So it just brings, that's good to be the element that brings you know, some stability to what we're doing, the ability to deliver those services and provide operational efficiencies through doing it.
Right. So Andrew, I know you're new to the job, so don't want to put you on the spot totally, but as far as what's your sense on the next year on a global level, because NEP, obviously you guys have a good global perspective.
Well, no, obviously, I agree with what the other two guys said, and I won't repeat that. I'll give you two other perspectives. I think the first one is, we've got to remember that, like I said when you asked me the previous question about what happened during lockdown, that our broadcast partners and even rights holders are they're struggling in the same way as anyone else in the broadcast industry is, but their struggles are slightly different. If you're a Sky and you've paid a lot of money to be able to put English Premier League on the TV, then if you don't have an experience that's of the highest possible quality, and that includes having a feeling that there's an audience there, because that's part of the experience, that are you going to get viewers who are going, that £100 to spend each month looking a little less like I want to spend it now. So you got to think from the perspective of the end user. We're about creating experience, we're about creating entertainment, and I think on the proviso that these events are going forward, what can we do working in conjunction with our partners to get really, really creative and create new things that can be presented, whether it's delivered digitally or not, to augment that experience away from things that can't be solved for, like putting audiences fully back into stadiums again. So I think that's kind of one area that I hope we see a lot more creativity in and change. And I suppose the other one is it's kind of linked to that, is helping customers with the economics of broadcast, and if we can reduce the cost of that broadcast by using things like remote production, then that's a win-win, because it's good for us because it keeps our facilities healthy and running and occupied, and it's healthy for customers because it reduces their cost of production, as well as some of the social benefits, such as it's cleaner and greener doing it like that, as Richard was just saying. So, but it all comes down to embracing change and actually seeing change as a good thing and a positive thing and a beneficial thing for this industry. And it all also comes down to partnership. And this is a partnership industry. This is all about people wanting to work together, and we've seen strength that came from that through the lockdown.
Sure. Thank you for that. We've just got one question from the audience. If somebody would like to take this, I'd be most grateful. They're saying from a couple of the previous answers, there looks to be a growing requirement for more capabilities in resource management. That's both for people and technology. Is that the case? Is there a growing requirement for more resource management? Who wants to take that?
Well, I'll say that if you like.
Cool.
I wouldn't say it's growing. I'd say it's changing. We've always had to do resource management because we've got to plan out where trucks need to be at any point in time, make sure they've got the right equipment and the right crews. I think with the move to things like centralized production, it's just added another dimension of complexity, because the opportunity of being able to scale it beyond the walls of a truck is there. So you've got to be a bit more thoughtful about how you do that. And then you could even go as far as to saying, if you actually start connecting hubs together, so you might have a US production being supported by our Netherlands hub, that adds another dimension of complexity. So I'd just say it's I wouldn't say it's getting increased. I'd just say it's just getting a bit more. You got to put more thought into it.
Understood. Thank you very much, Richard. Have you got anything to add before we wrap up today's session?
On that particular question,
yeah,
or
yeah. No, not particularly on the resource management side of things.
Yes, well, echoing exactly the same. We have exactly the same situations, don't we, with the trucks? It's just kind of amplifies the management, and in particular, as long as we have to manage bubbles, manage quarantine, particularly in the case of international travel, or even how different sports bodies, we can see variation between cricket, golf, and football here at CTV, as to how these different bodies wish to manage their bubble, and how they wish to protect the environments that the players, the contenders, and the staff and the broadcast personnel operate. So that's kind of an ever changing feast with the news as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's it now. We're actually over time. Thank you to everybody who's come and listened today. I hope you found it useful. I certainly found it very interesting and very enjoyable. Huge thank you to Panasonic. Without their support, we couldn't do things like this. Thank you to the speakers who've given their time today, Richard, Andrew, Wolfgang, my glamorous co-host Ken as well, got up very early for this. Thank you all for being on this call today. Thanks to the SVG Europe team who put all this together. There's a small feedback form will pop up when you leave this Zoom webinar. If you wouldn't mind spending 2 minutes filling it in for me so we can keep improving these, I'd be most grateful. But that's it now. Thanks for all your time. Thanks for coming. Please stay safe. Have a good evening. See you all soon.